Hi everybody, I'm Kelsey. Thanks for stopping by my channel today, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books of the year. I made a top 10 list and I'm so excited. It really took me a while to film this one because I was really going through my books and making sure I picked the best ones, and there's some that made it and some that didn't. It was actually really stressful to come up with these 10 books. There were 2 books that I almost added, and I think I'll talk about them at the end, maybe. Just kidding, I'm gonna talk about them right now. Okay, I'm back. The very first one is a historical romance. It's Heartbreaker by Sarah MacLean, and this is about Adelaide Frampton and the Duke of Claiborne. She is a thief and master pickpocket, and she's a part of a literal girl gang who exist to hold bad men accountable. He is a frumpy duke who can't seem to escape her antics and seems to always be around when she's causing chaos, and their romance is just hilarious. So that's the first one, and I talked about that in my romance wrap-up. And then The Secret History I talked about as a surprise yesterday. Finished it, and I can't stop thinking about it. So those are my 2 honorable mentions, Heartbreaker and The Secret History. We're gonna go from 10 to 1 with my least most favorite to my best most favorite. But this is a tie, and you'll see why, for number 10. So number 10 is The House of Earth and Blood and The House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. I read them both this year after reading all of ACOTAR last year, and I really liked her adult fantasy debuts. Both of them were wonderful. It took me a little bit to get into Crescent City to figure out what was going on, but then once I got into it, I could not put it down. And same goes for House of Sky and Breath. Once that book took off, it just never let go. I think I actually read it in like a day, and I was talking to one of my friends as I was doing it, and just having that experience with my friend Marty was so much fun. The ending, bananas, and I cannot wait to see what she does in the future and how she ties it all together. We'll read anything she writes at this point. So number 10 was the Crescent City duology at this point. I'm sure it'll be like 3 or 4 books in the end. Number 9 is The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy. You can watch my romance wrap up for the reasons why I love that so much, and I'll link the card up here. But just a super quirky romance novel that dealt with death and magic and grief and just all sorts of really beautiful romance inside a very quirky, weird book. I absolutely adored it. Okay, number 8 is The Cartographers by Pang Shepard. This was a book of the month, but it was also a book club selection for the Modern Mrs. Darcy book club. If you like magical realism, dark academia, you would probably like this a lot. It takes place in the New York Public Library in the map department, so these cartographers, and this girl has a falling out with her father over this gas station map, and she cannot figure out why, and why their whole relationship crumbled because of this map. And then he is found dead, and she is called to kind of like figure out his affairs, but something just doesn't seem right. And then this whisks her into this like magical world of map making and academia and friendship. And this book just had me flipping pages to the very end. It was such a good book if you're just looking to get lost into a world that's realistic and makes sense without a lot of world building, because it's present time. I just thought this was so clever and so good. So that was number 8. Okay, number 7, will not ever be quiet about my love for Louise Penny. So I read All the Devils Are Here this year. This was number 16 in the series. Yes, you need to read the series in order. It takes about 5 books for the series to really pick up. But once you get committed to this series, these characters are like family, and I cannot get enough of them. It's like just curling up by a fire. So good. So this one specifically, Inspector Gamache goes to Paris to see his son who lives out there, and then there's a murder of a close family friend, and they just are trying to solve that murder. But what I loved about this one specifically, and what Louise Penny does so well, is she really looks into relationships. So while these are murder mysteries, it's less about the murder and more about the character development. The relationship between Gamache and his son Daniel is so tenuous, and the look in this book of that relationship, how she examines it, it's just so good and so realistic. I think she just captures human emotion so well. So this one was number 7 for me. And again, I love Louise Penny. I'm going to read, I think, the next two to be caught up either in January or February, and it's going to be a binge out session because I'm not excited. All right, number 6 is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. This is about Elizabeth Zott. She is a scientist in the 60s, and this book looks like it's like light, fun, happy, but it's actually pretty heartbreaking. She faces a lot in her career. She wants to be this brilliant scientist, but men dominate and look down on her all the time. There is sexual assault in here, so make sure you are aware of that trigger. But she does ultimately fall in love with this man, and it's just precious, and society expects one thing out of her, but she's always going against the norm, and it like throws people off. It's so quirky, and she's super funny in how she has a no-nonsense approach to anything, but her life is also deeply traumatic. So I just think this book balances both grief and humor really well. There's also a dog character in this book by the name of 630. And I'm not usually one for like animal main characters in books because you get a lot of story from 630's perspective, but this one's done really well, and 630 is the greatest dog in literature. You can't change my mind. So definitely 10 out of 10 recommend this one. It was so fun. I've been giving it to a lot of people to read because I really enjoyed it that much. Number 5 is All My Rage, and I talked about this again in my surprises episode that I dropped yesterday, so I'm not going to really go into a ton of detail, but what I will say is this book packs an emotional punch, and there's so much depth to the characters, there's depth to the story, and these two teenagers experience so much trauma and yet come out ahead. Ultimately, it's just such a powerful book. I cannot speak more highly of it. Number 4 is Hannah Coulter by Wendell Berry. I was sent this as part of a subscription from Fabled in Waco, Texas, and this blew me away. If you do not like books that are character driven, you will not like this. It's so quiet. All it is about Hannah Coulter, and she's in her 80s looking back on her life in Kentucky in the town of Port William. This is, I guess, a whole series, but this is just really beautiful because Hannah lived a simple life and didn't really want for much but family and love, and you just are looking at her evaluate her relationships, her children, where she lived, her family, and it's wonderful. Wendell Berry writes such great American humanity. He's still alive, he's still writing, and it takes place in Kentucky. He just has a really beautiful way of explaining like agriculture and the rural lifestyle, and just a beautifully written book. I loved it so much. It'd be a really good winter read if you're just looking for a quiet novel, like as the snow is falling. Oh, you guys, I just love Hannah Coulter so much. All right, top 3. Number 3, Leave the World Behind. So this was a book of the month that I just hadn't gotten to, and it is about a couple who rents essentially an Airbnb in this rural, beautiful area, and suddenly something happens. The world gets real weird. You don't know if the world is ending. You don't know if there's war. You do not know what's going on. It might be nothing, but it's just something strange is happening, and the owners of the Airbnb come to the house and ask if they can hang out there too while this is going on. So it's both, you've got like this apocalyptic maybe storyline, and then you've got the dynamics of the two families. One is white, one is black. So there's a little bit of like racial commentary, there's end of the world commentary, there's teenagers that are driving their parents crazy. It was such a weird, unique book, and I loved it. It's very ambiguous. It ends and you don't know what's happening. And that to me is such a fun way to finish a book. I do love ambiguous endings. So this was Leave the World Behind, number 3. Number 2 is The Paper Palace. And this book my mom read and loved it. And usually if she loves something, I will too. So this is about a woman who, her family has this paper palace, this like cabin in the woods in, I think, North Carolina, or maybe not, maybe in the Hamptons. I feel like it's in the Hamptons. So I read this was my second book of 2022, so it's been a while. But her family has this cabin, and the book alternates between present day and past day. And you're seeing this woman grow up, the relationships, her family dynamics, but ultimately she's married to this man and they have kids, and another man that she loves, who she's had an affair with, is here too, because they're close family friends. They all come to the cabin together. The end of the book, you don't know who she chooses because the author writes it that way, and you're left to kind of guess. But I found something on Reddit that you're supposed to go back and read the book from the perspective of the day of only, and her choice is really clear. And I did that, and I do believe the choice was really clear. If you liked Where the Crawdad Sings and just that atmospheric kind of tension, this is that book. But know that this is super messed up, tons of triggers, morally ambiguous, people behaving badly. Like, it has all of that, but it's just riveting. And at the end, I finished it. And like I said, I went back and just reread the whole, like, that day and just thought it was brilliantly done. All right, we're gonna get to number one. I'm so excited. So this is a case of a book that I read at the wrong time. And it's truly a case of finding a book at the right time. So I started this in 2020 when it came out and put it down and DNF'd it, soft DNF'd it. Then I picked it up this year, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I will say it's still slow to get into, but once you kind of hit a point in the book, I couldn't stop reading because I wanted to know what was happening to Addie and Henry and Luke, and I still don't know which man I prefer in her life, but I just thought this was so clever. Addie makes the deal with the devil. So essentially, Addie's whole life, people will forget her the second they turn away from her. And so that totally impacts everything about her. So if you are hanging out with her and then you turn to like drink something over here and then look back, you'll have no idea that it's her. She has just really sad things that happen to her where people kick her out of hotels and apartments, and you know, she has a lover who doesn't remember her, like all of these things. And it's just a really unique dynamic. But one day she runs into someone who does remember her, and it changes everything. And so you see her relationship with the devil, you see her relationship with this person, and then other people, and it breaks your heart. It makes you so happy. Like, I cried so hard during this book, and not because like anybody dies. I just cried really hard because I just love these characters so much. So number one, Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Okay, so there's my top 10 books of 2022. Drop anything in the comments you want. As always, I'm so glad that you stopped by today and watched my video, and I will continue on with Vlogmas over the next week. It'll be more statistics and tags and fun stuff this week, less countdowns and wrap-ups. So again, thank you so much for stopping by my channel, and until next video, bye!